Well, hi everyone. Today's topic is hormesis. And I think we'll find out this is some common sense stuff we're already doing, but I think it's quite interesting to discuss the mechanics and the benefits of some of these activities. So let's define the term. So hormesis is defined as small doses of healthy stress resulting in increased vitality. To understand what is meant by hormesis, it's important to first define another term, a concept known as homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of balance among all of our body's systems, and it's needed to survive and function correctly. Here's a bold, concise statement about homeostasis. Aging, deterioration, and ultimately death are the manifestations of unsuccessful homeostasis. So things like DNA repair, removal of free radical molecules, detoxification, immune and stress response. These all impact our ability to survive and maintain our health. Hormesis strengthens and improves our homeostatic mechanisms. So hormesis includes activities which train our body to fight harder to survive as we age. Our bodies are designed to regulate equilibrium in our systems. As an example of homeostasis, when our core temperature gets too high, we sweat, which cools us down as it evaporates. And I was thinking of another common example too, which most of us probably do or know people that do, and that is getting a flu shot or a vaccine. So there too, we are injecting, that material into our blood system, and we might experience some fatigue or symptoms, but its purpose is to make our immune system stronger to combat that disease if it occurs. So the center of homeostasis is the hypothalamus region in our brain. It uses chemical messengers called hormones, controlling and monitoring everything from sleep, stress, body temperature, to thirst and hunger. So that's homeostasis in a nutshell. So why does tipping our systems out of homeostasis or stressing out our systems improve our vitality? Well, first off, we are talking about healthy stress. This discussion does not include things like getting drunk, drinking bleach, fist fighting, getting fired from your job, things like that. Those are toxic. So if applied to the proper doses and kinds of healthy stress, science agrees that hormesis is an aging intervention. These self-imposed challenges act to improve the function and tolerance to more severe challenges. So it's the very statement that whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but it's kind of to a point. So that leads us to the third section, which is why is it important to pay attention to the dose? So unlike Mae West, who is an American actress and sex symbol, who is famously quoted to state, "Too much of a good thing can be wonderful," I instead think that Paracelsus got it more accurate. He was a Renaissance physician from the late 1400s, and he's also known as the father of toxicology, which is the study of poisons. He famously stated that all things are poison and nothing is without poison, and the dose makes the poison. And we learned this too when I interviewed the cardiologist, Dr. Mike Twyman. He told us that he takes care of some professional athletes who experience significant atherosclerosis due to not recovering sufficiently from inflammation response of exercise. So I think we know this, but saying it out loud, exercise too is a drug, and we can have too much of it. And to defeat what Mae West said, certainly heart disease is not wonderful. So by prescribing the right dose of the right kinds of healthy stress, we're looking for what's called an adaptive response. And this will include things like more muscle fiber, stronger heart and lungs, better immune system, increased mitochondria, which are the cellular energy source in our cells, improved metabolism, and increased cognitive function. So now the heart of the discussion, what is the prescription? What are the activities and the amounts that are good for improving our longevity? Four of the big domains I want to talk about today include exercise, nutrition, heat and cold exposure, and mental challenges. And I guess before we just get right into it, I wanted to make a point about the background, or the slide I am showing there. That's my background. And you can see that's a graph, and the line going left to right is the amount of stress, or the dose that we're imposing of whatever activity we're talking about. And you see kind of an inverted J curve, as it's called. And what this is telling us is that that green shaded area is the healthy response, or the hormesis value of certain activities. And then once the dose becomes too large, then it kind of overloads our system and is detrimental to our health. Okay, so the first domain or area let's talk about is exercise. I think this is fairly widely understood and adopted, especially in our men's fitness group, as beneficial. But I wanted to point out that according to the Center for Disease Control, only 28% of Americans meet the guidelines for aerobic activity and resistance training, which is, we'll talk about it more in a second here, but 150 minutes per week and 2 times at least of resistance training. So what gets involved with exercise are, kind of 2 main things, among others. One is resistance training, or lifting weights. And here, the hormesis that we're doing is we're intentionally tearing our muscles. So we're creating micro tears in our muscle fibers by resisting against weights. And it also introduces mild oxidative stress. The adaptation that we want to get out of this beneficial stress is the repair of our torn muscles, which then results in muscle building, or it's also known as hypertrophy, and also we'll get stronger. And one of the main side effects of muscle training or weight training is improved metabolism. So we know that we're going to enjoy increased insulin sensitivity from adopting new muscle fibers. Now, regarding the dose, like we talked about, we want to do it 2 to 4 times a week, and we want to, kind of contain it in a 30 to 45-minute session. And we want to note too that adaptation from resistance training counts on adequate amounts of protein and also quality sleep and active recovery. So we're really trying to avoid what's called overtraining, which is going to, in this graph, get you into that red zone and raise our cortisol and kind of break down, catabolize the tissue. So we're looking for a healthy response by containing that dose. The second element of exercise we know about is cardio. And we talk about this quite often, but we want to try and achieve, as a per week dose, 150 to really more like 300 minutes of what we call zone 2 cardio respiratory training. Zone 2 means getting your heart rate up so that you're almost losing your breath. So you can still kind of converse, but it's more challenging. The adaptation that we're looking for with cardio is a stronger heart and more lung capacity, so kind of increasing our stamina. Okay, so enough about exercise, which I think we kind of all understand really well. The second area I want to talk about is nutrition. The most powerful nutritional thing we can do is to eat a variety of sources, but especially colors of fruits and vegetables. Ingesting these will do a lot of good things for nutritional content, but also introduce really valuable health benefits. And so I wanted to point out that just like animal cells, like us, plant cells also have mitochondria. So phytochemicals, or bright colors, are thought to be the result of plants' own battle with hormesis. So these bright colors reflect the adaptations of the mitochondrial stress in plants. So we kind of inherit some of that low level nutritional stress. And I wanted to give a quick word on some of the popular food colors and kind of some of their benefits. So I did do a little bit research, and I found that red foods, so think about things like tomatoes, beets, these are going to be really good for inflammation. They're high in antioxidants. They have anti-inflammatory properties, and they will lead to improvements in our lipids, our cholesterol. We can talk about green foods. Green foods, leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli are going to do a lot for our cardiovascular health. And then what's popular we talk about too is berries and things. So that's the blue and purple types of foods. These are also going to be really rich in polyphenols, and they're going to help with brain health. And I wanted to, before we leave nutrition, I want to make another point. So the other aspect of nutrition that I actually wrote about in my article, I want to tread lightly on out of respect to some learnings that I have gained from Alan Aragon, who is the greatest of all time in nutrition and exercise research. And that is any hormesis that we experience from intermittent fasting or delayed eating is pretty minimal. So I have heard from Alan that the hormesis idea of what's called autophagy, which is defined to mean cellular cleanup from, removing damaged cells, from delayed eating isn't really significant. And that really the main reason that you want to practice intermittent fasting, if you do, is that you like how you feel, or it's a method for you to achieve calorie restriction. So important point I wanted to make, and this one's for you, Alan, so I want to make sure that I called you out. Okay, so the third section let's get into in terms of hormesis activities is heat and cold exposure. So this is a particularly interesting area with some exciting new discussions from some trusted sources that I follow. They include people like Dr. Peter Attia, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, in regards to things like sauna bathing. Dr. Peter Attia recently posted quite a bit on cold exposure, which we'll touch on. And then Dr. Mike Twyman, again, the cardiologist that we visit with, he's a big believer in what's called infrared therapy. So anyway, with all these things, I'm going to touch on some of their features and risks and doses, but I'm not going to dive real deep, but I encourage you to read up on stuff in this area if you become curious. So let's talk about sauna bathing. So sauna bathing is just, sitting in hot temperature. The dose that we want to consider is maybe up to 20 minutes per session, maybe up to 4 times per week. And it's really great to add on after your weightlifting. In fact, I did it just this morning. I did some weightlifting and then I did do a sauna session. So the known benefits that relate to being in the sauna are reduced muscle soreness. And I read that up to 47% reduction in muscle soreness 24 hours post-exercise. It can improve our heart health, which I think stands to reason because basically we're helping the blood vessels expand, or vasodilate as it's called. And then one important thing that it does is it aids in muscle recovery. And again, this makes sense to me because if you think about it, with that enhanced circulation, we're pumping that oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to those damaged muscle fibers to induce repair. Rhonda Patrick shared recently some other research and understandings that sauna bathing can actually help lower dementia risk and also boost memory. Some additional advice or things to think about with sauna: be sure that you are hydrating because you're intentionally kind of becoming dehydrated in that scenario when you're in the sauna. Be mindful of the time spent. So, if you have a watch or an eye on a clock, keep an eye on the time. And then finally, with all this stuff, really check with your physician to see if it's okay if you're cleared for that. Because if you have high blood pressure, for example, you're probably not a great candidate to be in the sauna for extended periods of time. The second domain of heat and cold would be the cold exposure. So examples would include cold baths or cold showers. And the biggest selling point of cold exposure is going to be reductions in chronic inflammation. There's also some known neuro or psychological benefits from participating in this activity. So one big thing for you to know is do not do this right after lifting weights. The best time to do it might be the morning or maybe on your recovery days. And Dr. Peter Attia pointed this out in one of his recent Instagram posts, that this con is that it might reduce your muscle gains. Up to 10 to 20% hypertrophy and strength losses might occur from doing it right after muscle training. So again, and then in discussing the dose, I'd like you to consider something like 55 to 60 degree bath water. And again, if you have a smartphone or a timer, look for like a 3 to 5 minute exposure, kind of neck deep. Cold showers are also effective. It's a great way to get involved with cold therapy practice, a little bit more convenient. I like to do cold baths neck deep, primarily in the summer when it's really hot out and you're looking for that little bit of relief. I really hate doing them in the winter for the opposite of that, the reason. But one other note is if you are recovering from sickness, let's say a cold or the flu, wait until you fully recover before you, try much of this stressor, because that's going to be important for you to know. The last piece in the heat and cold or light therapy would be infrared therapy. So this is kind of a newer, kind of a light-based therapy method. And Dr. Mike Twyman, our cardiologist friend, is a big believer. He says it encourages mitochondria, or that energy cell growth, which everyone wants more of that. It'll decrease our recovery time. It reduces pain and inflammation, and it helps repair muscles. So kind of along the same lines as heat and cold exposure. But let's talk about the dose and the risks. And this is where really it's complicated. So you can get heat injuries if it's overdone or not done, correctly or mindfully. So you need to understand the parameters involved. And really, I would say, rely on working with an expert. So I'm not really prepared to give you a specific dose. It gets down to understanding the power density and the amount of seconds that you want to be exposed. And then last but not least, challenge your brain. So learn new information, especially something that interests you. This can involve anything from creating art, writing, kind of just learning new tactics. And I'll just give you a couple examples. For me, it's been about credit card points, which is my retirement hobby, which is luxury travel, and also a lot about fitness and longevity. These things excite me. So these things will increase your brain's neural networks. And the adaptation that we're looking for here is growth and reorganization of the brain, of our file cabinets. So anyway, that kind of is the summary of what I want to talk about. So in conclusion, think of your health systems. I like to think of it this way, kind of like a metronome, if you can picture that thing in the music room, or a pendulum on a clock. So doing smart amount of activities to move yourself out of balance sets off a process of adaptations to make your systems harder to kill, which is the name of the game. So that concludes my prepared comments, and I'm happy to visit on anything people are curious about talking about.
Hey, Brad, I did have a question for you. Do you know if high intensity interval training is considered a type of hormesis?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. And so Dr. Mike Twyman kind of touched on it in our talk, which I can refer some notes out of there below our Zoom. But basically, there's different zones of cardio. Kind of think about it 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So after you've mastered or gotten stronger at endurance with zone 2, Dr. Twyman says it is beneficial to do some short spurts of really high intensity stuff, which is what you're talking about, the high intensity interval training, where maybe you're doing your zone 2, but then for, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds, you do an all out sprint or what have you. That's getting into zone 5. That brings tremendous benefits, and that is considered hormesis, because there too, our goal is to increase our stamina, our lung capacity, and the function of our heart.
Great, thank you.
Very welcome. But I hope this kind of stuff helps. It's common sense stuff, as I alluded to in the beginning of the call, but I think it's neat to understand that the activities Will has us doing with our nutrition protocols, with our resistance training protocols, and active recovery especially, we're protecting ourselves, we're getting the appropriate dose of things that are going to benefit us and our longevity. So thank you guys very much. We'll make a recording and get this uploaded to the app as soon as we can. And thanks again.